Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. When you become the Emperor of a galaxy that is not quite ready for its totalitarian transition, you're naturally going to have people who want to assassinate you. Emperor Palpatine was the target of dozens of assassination plots each year of his rule. But no attempts came closer to achieving its goal than General Gentis' Cadet Rebellion in 19 BBY, shortly after the fall of the Republic and the beginning of the Empire. The general was a veteran and hero of the Clone Wars. He had led 70 clone troopers in a harrowing victory against the feared Separatist armored division known as the Burning Ember. Then on Mirk Major, when the Confederacy set off several large volcanoes, he orchestrated an evacuation that saved more than 6 billion people. He was the perfect military leader and extremely loyal to the Republic, so when Order 66 happened, he felt extremely betrayed by the Jedi, so much so that he personally executed the 3 Jedi that were stationed on his ship. Gentis was a fair man of strong convictions. He truly cared for the men that he trained, and he was one of the first to realize that with the rise of the New Order, something had changed in how the government was treating its soldiers. Or perhaps more accurately, no one really cared what happened to the soldiers when they were clones, but now that the Imperial citizens were filling in the rank and file, people were starting to notice the brutal lives they were living. During a military council meeting in the Imperial Center just weeks after Order 66, General Gentis walked outside for some fresh air and glanced upon the Imperial crematorium, where a long, steady line of transport ships were depositing 20 bodies each into the facility. These were the bodies of recently deceased Imperial soldiers. Hundreds of these ships were processed each hour, and Gentis finally started realizing the true nature of his new empire. Before this happened, Gentis had also experienced personal loss. All of his sons, aside from one, had been killed in the opening days of the rise of the New Order. Gentis also made sure he read the reports of the deaths of each one of his former cadets. Grand Moff Tarkin alone was responsible for getting 627 of his former cadets killed. And what bothered Gentis even more was the fact that these cadets had been killed in the most needless ways, like during construction accidents, training incidents. 11 deaths had even been the result of some type of medical testing. It was clear that Palpatine's New Order cared very little for the men serving it, and Gentis knew someone had to stop him and started planning an assassination attempt. In a lot of ways, General Gentis reminds me of another war hero who attempted to assassinate a dictator and also save his nation and people. I'm talking about Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg, one of the architects of the 20 July plot to kill Hitler. Like von Stauffenberg, Gentis was widely supported and respected by the rest of the military for his service during the war. And like von Stauffenberg, Gentis' plot involved 2 major parts. One was killing the dictator, and 2, starting a coup in that vacuum of power. General Gentis was in a unique position. He had access and ability to shape the minds of young men and women who had not yet been indoctrinated by the Empire. All of his cadets would have grown up during the Republic era, which championed ideas like democracy and independent thinking. The Empire's grip on the galaxy, both militarily and socially, was still limited. And so Gentis used his position, his experience, and fame to convince his cadets to help him carry out his plot. The Empire's first class of officers were ready to graduate within months of the rise of the New Order. Their whole training process had been sped up due to demand. A massive ceremony would take place in the Imperial City, the heart, brain, and nerve center of the entire Empire. The night after the ceremony, Gentis' cadets set up explosives at 72 Imperial targets in the area, including officer barracks, stormtrooper garrisons, comms and logistics centers, and so on. These simultaneous explosions would create chaos and confusion and cut off the Imperial Center from the rest of the galaxy. Meanwhile, General Gentis would meet personally with Palpatine and bring along his best cadets who he would present to the Emperor. Timed exactly with the explosions, they released a powerful necrotic virus known as Arth-6. This was a nasty bioengineered virus that, once inhaled, liquefied the lungs and started eating away the body from inside out. Immediately, all the guards and staff working around the throne were infected and killed. Darth Sidious was also immediately infected. He would have been killed by Gentis too had Moff Tracta not intervened. The Moth had lost a large portion of his body thanks to a detonator blast during the last days of the Clone Wars. He was on a ventilator now, which allowed him to not be affected by the virus. Even though Gentis failed to kill the Emperor and had to flee the throne room, he had no choice but to continue his operation. His cadets soon began locking down the Imperial Center, and Gentis opened up communications and declared himself the ranking officer on the planet and quickly began organizing a response to the so-called terrorist attack. Immediately after his message, he blacked out all communications and blockaded Coruscant. The reasons he gives for doing this is that his actions will prevent panic from spreading and also prevent the terrorists who are responsible from escaping the planet. Of course, the real reason he was doing this was so he could solidify his grasp on power. It's quite similar to von Stauffenberg's actions when he mobilized the National Reserve Forces to secure the capital city of Berlin, and simultaneously cut off communications at Hitler's Wolf's Lair, where the assassination attempt had occurred. Even though he wasn't sure if Hitler was dead, he knew that if he could convince enough of the army to follow him, his coup would be successful. This was General Gentis' plan as well. If he and his cadets managed to convince enough of the Empire that they are now in control, their coup will succeed and they won't be executed, because you're only executed for treason when you fail. Meanwhile, Palpatine is barely holding on. The virus is tearing apart his body, and only his massive power in the Force prevents him from expiring. Lord Vader and a newly graduated cadet named Loretta Tom join up with Moff Tracta and place Palpatine in a stasis chamber and hide out in the secret bunkers below the Imperial Palace. They need to find a very advanced medical facility immediately and cure Palpatine of this virus. It's crucial that he survives because the Empire is still very vulnerable at this point. Its military is stretched thin and rebellions keep popping up in former separatist worlds. The only thing that was really holding the Empire together right now was Emperor Palpatine. Luckily, Darth Vader remembers many of the secrets of the Jedi Order and recovers data on a hidden Jedi facility simply known as the Prism. The Prism was sort of the Jedi's version of the Citadel, but when the Citadel, a supermax prison designed to hold rogue Jedi, fell to the Separatist Alliance, the Jedi had to figure out their own way to imprison dangerous criminals that couldn't be held in traditional Republic prisons. The Prism was a top-secret black site which was run by the Jedi Order throughout the Clone Wars without the knowledge of the Galactic Senate or even Palpatine. Just another sign that the Jedi were not to be trusted and would eventually betray the benevolent Emperor. Hidden deep within wild space in the Diab system, the local electrical storms made it impossible for transmissions to reach and exit the prison. The Jedi were so confident that no one could find their secret facility that they had no external defenses placed there, and the whole prison was run by a single Jedi who controlled hundreds of warden droids. So when the Imperials arrived at the prison, the Jedi Master in charge wasn't even aware of what the Empire was, let alone the fact that Order 66 had wiped out most of the Jedi Order. And so Vader makes quick work of her and rushes Palpatine to the advanced medical bay within the prison. While Palpatine is recovering, Cadet Tom comes up with an idea. Vader needs an army to command against Gentis' coup, and the prison was full of fighters. Sure, most of them were criminal scum and psychopaths, but they had all fought with the Separatists and were enemies of the Republic. The Empire had destroyed the Republic, and the Imperials would use that to their advantage. But first, Vader wanted all the prisoners to fight for the right to serve him. And so 208 of the most dangerous prisoners in the galaxy started a death match right there outside the Prism's main landing bay. Only 33 managed to survive, and they would all give their allegiance to Vader. Back on Coruscant, Gentis was planning his final move, which was to lure Grand Moff Tarkin into a trap and then take over his feared Death Star. Whoever controlled that terrifying weapons project controlled the Empire. And as an added bonus, Gentis could bring Tarkin to justice personally. But little did he know Tarkin had several stowaways on his ship, and right on cue, they burst out of Tarkin's shuttle and start attacking Gentis' cadets. Although the cadets outnumber Vader's force 8-1, they never really stood much of a chance. The criminals that Vader had brought along with him were all uniquely skilled in combat and were superhumans or aliens in their own right. In the middle of the melee, Cadet Tom manages to track down his former friend, Cadet called Gentis, son of the traitorous General Gentis, and executes him. Gentis is broken after losing the only thing that really mattered to him anymore and stops fighting, which is when Emperor Palpatine reappears healthy and more full of life than ever. In the following days, the remaining members of Gentis' crew were rounded up and executed. The majority of these conspirators were young cadets. The prisoners who helped Vader were pardoned by the Empire as promised and given a ship, which they were directed to take to the Outer Rim. Unfortunately, it suffered some minor mechanical issues while trying to make orbit, killing everyone on board. It was totally an accident. Now, what's interesting about Gentis' story is he's not the only teacher who seems to want to kill Palpatine. Only 5 years later, another famous Republic war hero by the name of Pel would make an attempt on the Emperor's life as well. While Palpatine and Vader were touring Commandant Belo's Flight Training Institute located on the cruiser Defiance, Belo personally programmed the hyperspace route, which would cause the entire school to crash into Christophsis' sun. Luckily for the Empire, a cadet by the name of Ray Sloan noticed the hyperspace coordinates before this could happen, and the assassination attempt was stopped. For some reason, it seems like officers who train young men into battle have a sense of responsibility for those young men when they get to active duty. In both cases, Belo and Gentis disapproved of Palpatine's methods and how his commanding officers were using the Imperial Army. Well guys, let me know what you think about this whole entire situation. Do you think Gentis was a hero or was he just a traitor? Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. And as usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.